So Dr. Greg Martin is with us. So he's with us right now from Dublin. Hi, Greg. How you doing? And he's going to talk to us about communication. So that's something that I think has really been drawn home today, is that communication is very important, especially when you're talking about complex issues. And in global health, there's often a lot of complex issues. So Dr. Greg Martin, every week you can see him on a podcast called This Week in Global Health. It's a great resource for a student who's interested in global health and learning more and becoming more involved in it. And so I'd like to welcome Dr. Greg Martin, and I'm going to let you take it from here, Greg.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, it's great to be with you in the virtual sense of the word. I can't see any of you, so I'm just kind of looking at a screen, but I trust you can see and hear me. And so if people have questions, Jen, maybe they can just indicate to you that they've got a question and you can pass the question on to me or something like that. Because I think the more we can make this interactive in as much as we're able to, the better. So questions, answers, etc., that'll be great. Now, I'd like to do two things, if that's okay. I understood that, and I think it's the case, that this day that you've got today set aside is, to an extent, it's about working and careers in global health. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about communications. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to talk a little bit first about finding a job in the global health space. And then what I'm going to try and do is connect that up with this idea of social media, social networking, and communication, and how that can be a tool in terms of your quest to find a job. And then I've got one or two things I want to talk about in terms of the right and the wrong way for organizations to use social media. But that's kind of 30 seconds, and I'll stick that on at the end. Now, I can't see if people are nodding or shaking their heads, but is that okay? Is that a reasonable way to go forwards? I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay. All right. So a little bit about me, and the reason I'm going to tell you this is because I think my career, although it's been exciting and I've loved it, if one were to plan out a career in global health, I think the way I've done it is probably the wrong way to do it. So there's a couple of lessons to be learned from perhaps things that I've found perhaps a little bit frustrating with the way I approached my career, and you'll understand what I'm talking about in a second. So I've worked in numerous places, which has been great. I've loved that, and I've worked in a lot of different disciplines, in a lot of different organizations, with a lot of different kinds of roles. So what that's translated into is me being quite a generalist. So I worked as the head of science and research at the World Cancer Research Fund. So that's cancer. I worked as a clinical research fellow in maternal and child health, and looking at quality of care issues at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And that was largely quality of care and health services. I worked as the director of elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV at the Clinton Health Access Initiative. So that was HIV. I worked working on the market dynamics for products for HIV, TB, and malaria at UNITAID, which was part of the World Health Organization. So that was all sort of health economics and microeconomics, really. So I've worked in all sorts of different funny places, and these different places tended not to complement each other in terms of them building up to one very marketable skill set. So that, which I think the world needs generalists. And by all means, I don't want to discourage that, but it is nevertheless the case that if you are a generalist and you've got experience in a diverse range of issues and a diverse range of sort of roles and disciplines, when you're applying for a job, you're often pitching yourself up against somebody who has done that very specific thing that they've advertised for the last 20 years. And that can be difficult. That said, it's also true that as you become more senior and as your career unfolds, being a generalist sometimes can be in your favor, because sometimes organizations are looking for people that can look across issues and across disciplines. So, take everything I'm saying with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but I'm just throwing that out there. Now, the reason I'm saying all of that is when people ask me for career advice in the global health space, I often say to them, look, you've got to answer a few questions yourself. You've got to ask yourself the question, what in terms of disease areas am I interested in? And you don't have to have an answer off the bat. That could be something that emerges with time. But think about it, right? So there's HIV, there's TB, there's malaria, non-communicable diseases, neglected tropical diseases, maternal and child health,
climate change and health, complex humanitarian emergencies, access to medicine issues, health systems. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the sooner in your career you can identify an area of interest, like if you say, I'm interested in health systems or I'm interested in access to medicines, you then will find opportunities to hone a set of skills that enable you to add value in that area. So keep that in mind. You don't have to have an answer off the bat, but think about it. Think about the discipline so the second question is, think about the discipline in terms of the basic sciences that underpin public health, the discipline that you feel most comfortable with. Right. So we know there's epidemiology, there's economics, there's policy science, there's social sciences, there's management, right? You need to know a little bit about all of them. But with time, what you want to do, if you can, is find one of these disciplines and really hunker down and get a good, solid set of skills that make you very marketable in that area. The third question is, think about the type of role that you would like to play within an organization. All right. So roles within organizations, there's monitoring and evaluation, there's communications, there's project management, there's people that are employed for their sheer technical and analytic skills in a particular discipline, there's management, there's finance and admin, there's leadership. So there's different roles in an organization. You know, what you'll find as your career unfolds is that most of public health and global health is really about getting stuff done. Right. So on a day-to-day basis, you go into the office and you're just trying to get things done. And you don't spend a lot of your time leaning on, all the theory and stuff that you learned at university. You actually spend yourself just trying to problem solve and get things done from A to B. And in that sense, you've got to think about where would you best add value, and so think about the area, the disease area, potentially, or the demographics. So sometimes it's not a disease, but it's a group of people that you're interested in, like maternal and child health, or internally displaced people, or think about the discipline where you feel most comfortable. Think about the type of role that you're interested in. And then what you'll find that the combinations of the answers to those three questions will start emerging. So you might find that you're really interested in HIV and in health economics, and you hunker down in sort of all the health economics around providing care and treatment for people with HIV. Or you might find that you're really interested in health economics, but it's across all the diseases. That's fine. Or you might find that you're interested in HIV, so you hunker down in a disease area, but you're interested in that across a range of disciplines. In other words, there's sort of combinations and permutations of these things. But the more you think about it, the more you'll kind of get a sense of where your place is in this very kind of higgledy-piggledy, complicated space that we call the global health space. So that's the first three questions. The next one is, think about the type of organization that you'd like to work within, because there's a range. It's not, there's quite a lot of different types of organizations. So think about that. There's funding organizations, there's implementation organizations, research, advocacy, governance, product development, clinical community work. There's the UN agencies. So there's a large range of kinds of organizations. And it's useful to think about that, because when you start looking for a job, you can start making a list. And you take each of those headings and you say, okay, the UN agencies, which agencies are out there that overlap with my interest? There's the WHO, there's UNAIDS, there's UNICEF, there's UNFPA, and you make this list. There's the World Bank, and you make a list. You do the same thing with governance and advocacy and implementing partners and funders. And then you've got a nice long list of organizations you can think about, and you can start ticking them off or contacting them or networking, finding people that you can reach out to in those organizations. The last question that I think you need to think about when you're thinking about your career in global health is, where do you want to live in the long run and in the short run? So if you're young and you don't mind, bouncing around India and Africa and that's terrific. Get that experience if you can. It's always useful. If you're married with kids, you might say, look, I really want to be in Geneva or New York or San Francisco, I'd like to be at the head office of an organization. But think about these things, because it affects the kind of organization you're going to look to in terms of where you want to work and the kind of job you're going to look at and apply for. Okay, so now the question that you're asking, I imagine, is, how do I get my foot in the door? Because the problem everybody always alludes to is, how do I get experience if I don't have experience? And I get asked that quite a lot. Now, the one thing that I would say to you is, don't rely entirely on formal employment as the only place that you can get experience in the global health space. Okay, you can do internships, you can do volunteer work, but you can start a nonprofit, you can start an initiative, get involved. I'll tell you a great little story. If any of you watched This Week in Global Health, one of the presenters on there is Chris Ronson. Now, before I started This Week in Global Health, I used to, and I still do, create little YouTube videos, teaching videos for public health and global health on YouTube. And Chris reached out to me out of the blue in the discussion. Underneath YouTube videos, you can leave a comment and things. So she left a comment there saying, can she help at all? I've got this YouTube channel. Do I need a hand? Is there anything she can do to help out? I got back in touch and I said, yes, I need help. I do. I need a pair of hands. We're trying to start this thing called Twig. We've got to start a web page. We need to do something on Twitter. We've got to do all sorts of things, and I need help. So she then started helping me get This Week in Global Health off the ground. Off the back of that, I've been able to introduce her to all sorts of people at the World Health Organization, where I used to work, and I still do some consulting work for them. They had some consulting work that they wanted me to do, and I was unable to. I didn't have the time at the time. They needed me to go into the Ukraine. So I said to them, do you mind if I send Chris? I sent Chris. She did some consulting work at the WHO in the Ukraine, after which they offered her a job, and she now has a fantastic job at the World Health Organization. And I think she's at the beginning of a very exciting career. But that all came from her reaching out to me on YouTube saying, can I give you a hand? So if you don't have experience, get experience just by reaching out to people and saying, can I help? You're writing a paper, can I co-author it? You're doing some data research, can I help you with that? You need me to just help out, and you'll find that you'll get experience. Along those lines, don't let your education be confined to what you get through formal institutions. You can, even when you finish your degree, carry on, identify ways and opportunities to extend your education and to better yourself, and that'll make you more competitive in the job market. Now, you may be aware that there's these massive online open access courses, these MOOCs that you can do. They're fantastic. I'm doing one right now. I'm doing one on how to do R programming. So R is a statistical package, or it's actually a programming language that lets you do analysis, analyze data. Now, if you are quantitatively inclined and you like data and you like to analyze data and statistics, you can download R for free. You can go and do one of these free online access open access courses, and you can become an expert in R. It makes you very marketable in the global health space. Now, when I talk to people about R, I'm just using R as an example. People often say to me, but R is difficult. You know what I mean? R is not easy. It's not intuitive. It's not user friendly. That's part of it. It's free, so there's not a nice interface. But it's extremely powerful. And if you ask me, it's definitely the future of data analysis. But so people say, well, R is so difficult. R being difficult is perfect, because if it was easy, everyone would do it. The fact that it's difficult, if you go out and make the effort, when you're applying for a job, you're the one guy that says, I can use R. One guy or girl, we'll keep it nice and generic. The fact that it's difficult actually plays into your hands, because you can be the person that, despite the fact that it was difficult, went out and of your own volition learned how to use it, and now you're an expert in that area. And believe me, the organization that you're talking to will have heard of R, and because it's difficult, none of them will know how to use it, and you'll be the knight in shining armor that's swooped in to save the day. So, don't just do things that are easy. Find things that are difficult, and do those. And then, if you don't have a job, you want a job, but you don't have experience, make yourself available to do consulting work. There's lots and lots of consulting work out there. And when you do consulting work, firstly, you get experience. Secondly, you get to know the people in these organizations. They get to know you. And that very often leads to a job. The World Health Organization is a perfect example. I worked there for 2 years. I didn't meet a single person at the WHO who got their job cold. In other words, saw an advert on the internet, applied for it, got interviewed, and got offered a job. Everybody kind of did some consulting work, got a short-term contract, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole, it's under the aegis of it's all being transparent. It's not very transparent, but I'm telling you, consulting work is definitely a foot in the door in organizations like UNICEF, WHO, the World Bank, certainly the bigger organizations. They're always looking for consultants. And don't think of consulting work as necessarily high-level strategic consulting that, you need to have a PhD and 20 years experience. Consulting work is often just nuts and bolts. They need a pair of hands. They need someone to help them with the literature review or something. It's not difficult. They just need a pair of hands because the project's running behind, or somebody left the organization, or for whatever reason, they need a bit of help. and you just make yourself available. So then my final little piece of advice, I'm talking quite quickly because I've got to get onto the social media stuff, which is really what we're supposed to talk about today. With respect to getting your foot in the door, you got to network like crazy. Network, just be now, I'll just give you a little bit of advice on networking, right? You go onto LinkedIn, you can find anyone. You can find, the chief exec of the organization you want to work for. You can find the CEO somewhere on LinkedIn, probably. And you can reach out to them, right? You can send these emails. So you've got access to almost anybody in the global health space if you want it. The question is, what do you do with that? My suggestion is three things that I'd suggest. The first is send a message and keep it short. If you send a long message, you are just annoying that person. They've got a busy day. They get lots of emails and messages and people and vying for their attention. And now they've got a 3-page essay from you who they've never heard of, explaining to them in detail how experienced you are and how much you're going to be able to add value to their organization. And they will just be annoyed and they will not reply to that unless they're extremely kind. If you send a short email or message, like a 3-liner, they'll read it, because who doesn't read 3 lines, right? Super duper easy. Include in that 3-liner a question. So you're giving them a reason to reply. Otherwise, so a nice insightful question. And you do that by understanding the person you're sending the message to. So if they're an academic, find a paper that they've written, read that paper, and send them a very insightful question about something that they've written. And then I'm sure that they will reply. Not always, but 9 times out of 10, or ask them for advice. Everybody likes to be asked for advice. So send a message, make it really short, include a question. They're likely to respond, and then don't bug them, but keep in touch with them in 6 months' time. Not a year. In a year's time, they've forgotten who you are. In 3 months' time, they're finding you annoying. 6 months is probably the sweet spot. Get back in touch in 6 months with another question. The point is, you've established this relationship. Down the line, you might see in that organization there's a job opportunity, and you are now in a position to reach out to that person and say, I see you're looking for someone. Just wanted to let you know I'm available. And they know who you are. They know your name. And you don't do that with one person. You do it with 50 people. And if you do that, you're setting yourself up not just for your immediate next job, but a whole career worth of possible job opportunities. All right. So that is my very speedy how to get a job in global health talk. Now, let me get back to any questions on that, and then I'm going to talk about new media and social media quickly. And I know we're on a clock because somebody else has got to talk, and we've got some sort of time limit. So maybe you can tell me how much time I've got left as well.
I think you've got 15 or 20 minutes left. So,
okay. Any questions?
Are there any questions? I think that was a great compliment to some of the career advice that we heard earlier. Any questions for Greg on careers? No, I think we're eager to hear about communications and new media.
Okay, so I'll tell you, and the reason I kind of used up a bit of time talking about careers in global health is because the stuff that I'm going to say on new media and social media, I don't have a lot to say, but what I think I've got to say, I think it's important. I've learned a couple of lessons in the sort of social media and new media space, which I hope organizations in the global health space start to sort of take note of. So I'll tell you a little bit about my sort of experience in this space. There's a few things that I've done wrong, and I think there's some interesting lessons to learn about how not to use social media. So I just randomly got interested in Twitter a little while ago, like a few years ago, and so I thought, oh, Twitter's interesting. Like everyone's on Twitter, and I started a little Twitter account. I started one for I'm the editor of a journal called Globalization and Health. So I started a Twitter account for that, and I started a personal one, and I was quite excited when I found that there were people following me, and I thought, oh, this is excellent. And then I thought, well, one of the ways to get people to follow you is you follow people, and then some of them follow you back, so you can end up getting sucked into Twitter and get focusing on the size of your audience, and you there's all sorts of ways you can get a larger and larger audience. You can send out the sorts of tweets that will get retweeted, and you get more visibility that way. There's ways and means of kind of trying to build your audience, and the mistake is that you'll end up thinking of yourself especially if you're an organization. Individuals do this, but organizations are even worse at this. Thinking of Twitter as this medium, as an opportunity to broadcast and not to engage. In other words, it's all about the organizations on Twitter. If you follow them, you'll very often find, and I do this. So this is, me, like I'm talking to myself now. They use Twitter and they often use social media, Facebook and Twitter, and what else is there? There's Tumblr, there's the LinkedIn groups, they use these things as an opportunity for me to get my message to you. I'm less interested in what you're trying to say to me. I'm just interested in making sure that you are listening to what I have to say. And one of the reasons I know for sure that I can't listen to what you're saying is because I'm following 3,000 people. So when I look at my Twitter feed, I just see noise, right? And what I need to keep in mind is when I send out a tweet, I'm sending out a tweet to other people that have got 3,000 people they're following. And so they're seeing noise as well. And they're unlikely to be paying close attention to what I'm tweeting. So Twitter's turned into this kind of a noisy environment for a lot of people, not for everyone. And unfortunately, I'm not in the bucket of people that have used Twitter properly. What people should be doing in Twitter is they should be saying, look, I don't need to have tens of thousands of people following me. I need to have a smaller group of people that follow me, a small group that I follow, but these are the right people. And I'm engaging with them. In other words, I'm reading what they tweet and I'm commenting and responding to it. And I'm sending out tweets that I know they're reading and they're commenting and responding and potentially retweeting. And and incidentally, it's those kinds of tweets that land up going viral or getting more visibility and traction because they're getting tweeted by the right people. And I tell you where so I'm not an expert on Twitter, and I can say that partially because I do it all the wrong way. I have lots of people following me on Twitter, and certainly a lot of people follow globalization on Twitter, globalization and health on Twitter. But I've certainly never used it the way I now think it should be used. So I made a concerted effort when I started working on YouTube to do things differently. And I made a decision that I would put videos on YouTube because I discovered YouTube is actually a social platform. You can create a community. You can have people subscribe to your channel. They can comment on your videos. You can respond to them. It's all linked in with Google Plus now. So the YouTube Google Plus space is actually it's another social media space. And so I decided when I started on YouTube that I would do things differently to the way I did it on Twitter. And I thought I will use this as an opportunity to develop a community and to develop relationships with the people that are interested in my videos. And I'm not going to be obsessed with how many people subscribe to my channel, but I'm going to make sure that if somebody comments on a video that I've made, that I respond to them. And so with all the videos I've made on YouTube and all of the videos we've done on Twig, if anybody has commented on any of the videos, I have always responded to their comments. And if they've gone to the Twig webpage and they've filled in a form there, you can send messages to me. I've always responded in email. And if they email me, I've made my email address, my Twig email address, sort of publicly available. If people email me, I always respond. And yes, that takes up masses of time. It's extremely time consuming, but it's worth it. You land up really developing really interesting relationships with people. You learn a lot from them and you develop a community. And off the back of that, I think off the back of making that kind of effort, the YouTube channel, I think has done really well. We've in a very short space of time, we've had about 250,000 views. We've got about 5,000 subscribers. So the YouTube channel, for something in the global health space, I'm really happy with the way it's going. And I think we've got a community of people that, they know that if they leave a comment on my video, I'm going to respond. And I think that makes them much more interested in the channel, and they come back and they re-watch videos and they watch other videos, and there's interaction and back and forth. And it's a real social environment, and it's not just about broadcasting. And I think the way I've engaged with Twitter has been all wrong. The way I've engaged with YouTube, I think I've certainly learned a lot and done it in a much better way. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this about YouTube in particular is being on YouTube, I went, of course, and did a search for all the other organizations that may have a YouTube channel. And actually there's hundreds. I mean, so if you do a search for public health or global health on YouTube, everyone's got a YouTube channel, the World Health Organization, the Global Fund, IAVI, Find, MMM, everyone's got a YouTube channel. So I went to all these YouTube channels, and I went to a lot of them. I must have gone to maybe 50 of them, and I chose 1 or 2 videos from each channel, and I made a comment on their video. I went down below the video and I made a comment. And so I probably made an effort, and I made probably about 100 to 150 comments on videos on YouTube just to see what would happen. And I never received a single reply. In other words, there's not a single organization that I engaged with on YouTube commenting on their videos made a reply. And these are organizations that have full-time communication staff. There are people whose job it is 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to look after their social media. They're not doing it part-time in the middle of the night like I am. It's their job. And yet not a single one of them replied to one of the comments that I made on YouTube. And I thought to myself, there's a huge missed opportunity here. An organization like the World Health Organization could have its YouTube videos could be seen by, tens of millions of people, but they're not. You go to some of the WHO YouTube videos, they've sometimes been seen by 10 or 20 people. For the World Health Organization, with all of its kudos and branding and gravitas, they managed to get 10 people to watch their video. And I think it's because of their complete lack of engagement with their audience. And I think they also make some mistakes in terms of the type of content they stick on there. But nevertheless, I think there's a huge missed opportunity. And I think, I haven't looked at this carefully, but I suspect that the same problem applies in the way these organizations engage with Twitter and with Facebook and with all of the social media. I think that they all see it as an opportunity just to stick content out there and get it in front of people, instead of seeing it as an opportunity to build a relationship and engage with an audience and try and build up a community. Okay, so that's my 10 cents worth on using social media in the global health space. I suppose the summary is use it as an opportunity to engage with people and create a community, not just broadcast. Yeah, that's my message. Anyway, any questions, thoughts, comments, gratifications, problems, or suggestions?
Yes, we have questions.
Okay.
So this is Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. I'm just wondering if you have any advice about building a short-term international campaign.
So a short-term international campaign, I think, so what we've often done with This Week in Global Health, if we've done an episode in a particular area, let's say we would have done an episode on health systems, for example, and we would have been very interested in people that work in that specific area. We would have been very interested in trying to reach out to them and let them know, so not the whole global health community, but that very particular group of people, let them know that we've created an episode on a subject matter that we think they're interested in. And what we would do is we would identify a lot of organizations that we know have an overlapping interest in that area, and we would, as a team, we would all engage. Literally, I mean, this is what we would do. We would email, phone, tweet, do whatever you can. Get in touch with their communications teams of those different organizations. And it's not always easy, but there are ways to find these people. You can sometimes, like LinkedIn again, is a great way to find people. You find people and you let them know, look, we're doing a short campaign. We want to reach people in the area that are interested in health systems. We're going to send out some tweets. Would you mind retweeting them? Could you stick this on your web page? So in other words, what I'm saying to you is try to incorporate the human element into your social media campaign. Just sending out tweets or sticking stuff on Facebook is not the whole battle. You want to find the human being that's behind the Twitter account, or the human being that's behind the Facebook account that manages that thing. And you want to reach out to them and develop a relationship and say hi and get on the phone with them. Even better, meet them in person, but that's mostly not possible. But short of meeting them in person, get on the phone with them and say, hi, we're doing something, we think there's an overlapping interest, would you give us a hand? And so I think people that work in social media kind of imagine that you can do everything from your desktop, and I think you've got to bring that kind of personal interaction into the game if you can. So that's the one I could, it's not easy, but I think that's the best way to do it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? I was kind of curious, whenever you do a lot of shows about different topics in global health, and often the messages are very complex, and your audience, it's a lot of students and a lot of people who maybe aren't familiar with global health. So how do you go about constructing your message to get it out to such a wide audience? What's your strategy?
So, it's a great question, and I'm not sure that I've got a good answer, in that it's an ongoing problem, and that is, where do you pitch your message? If you make it too cursory and too simplistic, your core audience with a deep interest in global health that have a lot of technical knowledge are going to be bored. And if you make it too technical, people that have a very sort of scanty knowledge base are going to find it difficult to engage, and they're going to drop off. So what do? We often, to be honest, I think we do reach a relatively broad audience, but we actually do try and focus on a very specific audience. We think when we think about our content, we imagine our audience as a group of students or young professionals in the global health space. So we've got like a mental image of what our audience, the audience that we're trying to target, look like, and we know that we get people on either side of that, but we understand we cannot cater for them all, and so we try and package a message that would be of interest to a young person studying public health or global health, or having studied it is kind of new to the career. And we know that some of the content will be of interest to other people as well, and that's great. But we do try to kind of have this imaginary audience, and we have a gut feeling of what it is, the level that we need to pitch the content for them. But I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's I think anybody creating communication needs to think very carefully. And this is about empathy. So empathy is the ability to stick yourself in someone else's shoes. So you need to imagine the audience that you're really trying to target, put yourself in their shoes if you can mentally, and think to yourself, what does this person want to hear? How much do they want to hear? How much information? What level of technical detail? And something else that you need to think about, which we struggle with, is how long should this video be? So, I mean, even though I know I've been talking for quite some time now, I'm quite a big believer in short messages, bite-sized content. And I know on Twig we don't always do that. Sometimes we talk on forever, but in reality, I'm a big believer in, there's the old adage, sorry I wrote you a long letter, I didn't have time to write you a short one. So usually when things go on too long, it's because you haven't thought about the message very carefully. And the more you think about things, the more you're able to be concise. A great example, maybe what I think is maybe the best communication that I've seen on YouTube is a YouTube channel called Minute Physics. And this guy does physics tutorials, each of them literally in 1 minute. And he covers very, very complicated subject matter. He does relativity and what is gravity and how big is the universe, everything in 60 seconds. And it's a great example of how, if you think about your content very carefully, you can be very concise. I don't know if that answered your question.
Your advice, I guess, to sum up would be try to have a target audience, and then try to really know that audience when you're crafting your message specific to them.
Exactly. Thanks. You see, that's an example of being concise. And I waffled 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, we have another question from an audience member.
Hello, I'm Lester Martinez. I've been dealing with social media, and one of the applications industry is using is to ascertain the feelings of the audience that is using social media. So you can see if you're achieving the behavior change just by looking at the input of social media. So there are tools, like Twitter will give you tools that will help you mine that data and try to ascertain behaviors. Are you using any of those tools? That's question number one.
So I haven't ever used those tools, but I've heard of them, and they sound fascinating. And I think it's definitely the future. This idea of big data and being able to sort of in real time analyze streams of data that are indicative of people's behavior, I think it's fantastic.
The second tool that is out there that is kind of scary are called bots, B-O-T-S. Are you familiar with bots? They're artificial intelligence software programs that can behave like humans in the social media environment. And it can be used for a lot of things, for evil things and for good things, to steer people in one direction or in another direction. I guess you're not familiar with bots, or are you using it, or?
No, I've never used them. I know that they're out there, and I've never really thought about the impact that they have. But I mean, as you're talking, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm sure these are things that can be used with all sorts of strange intentions to shuffle political opinion or social opinion in one direction or another. So that's interesting, and I don't really know much about it, but I'm sure it's...
Just to give you an idea, the person most followed in China in social media is a bot developed by Microsoft. It's a young lady, and if you tweet with them, you don't have a clue that you're tweeting with a computer that has over 600,000 followers, but she's using the input of the 600,000 followers to give you a very human input to the answer of the question of whatever the topic you're dealing with. So if you're talking with the weather, a silly comment of weather, she will pull out who else is from that region, what they're saying about weather, and they'll send you back a tweet that'll talk about weather. Is very real and very timely. So it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So I'm saying the technology is in the state now that we have to learn how to use it for good.
Wow, very interesting. That's fascinating, actually. Thanks very much for sharing.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. Everyone, let's give Greg a round of applause. Thank you for joining us. It was great to have you.
You're welcome. Great to be here. Take care.
Yes. We can pull up the Prezi. That's already pulled up, I think. I don't know how to get to it on here. Aha. Don't actually know if this is a touchscreen. Ah, there's a mouse. Okay. Great. Okay, so I am going to follow those fantastic presentations. There's only so much more I could say, with a very brief overview of how N7 uses some of these topics, some of these tools that we've talked about, and really just our overall mission and tone as a campaign, because a large part of what we do is communication. So I explained before, N7, we're a grassroots advocacy, education, and fundraising campaign of the Global Network for Neglected Tropical Diseases. And since we launched at the end of 2011, we've accumulated a pretty impressive global following, and I'll speak a bit more about that towards the end of this. But over the course of that, we've learned some lessons about how to communicate about this very complex global issue in a way that's engaging, inspiring, and really moves people to action. And I was definitely taken with what Dr. Martin talked about, the difference between broadcasting and engaging on some of these social platforms when you're using communication tools. So a bit about what we strive to do in all of our communication as a campaign. First of all, we try to convey the scope and the hope of NTDs. So what I mean by that is conveying both the scope of the problem, the sheer number of people infected by these diseases, the impact that they can have in your health and development, really focusing on what a problem this is, but always coupling that with a very positive and engaging message about the hope that we have for the control, elimination, or eradication of these diseases, depending on which one we're focused on. So really coupling, again, the sense of the problem, but also moving people towards being part of a solution. So I think a good example of how we try to do that is something called our Mission in a Minute video. If we have volume, it'd be great to turn that up.
We're on a mission to see the end of 7 diseases. You may never have heard of elephantiasis, river blindness, snail fever, trachoma, hookworm, whipworm, or roundworm. But over 500 million children in the developing world have these diseases living and breeding inside their bodies. The effects are devastating. They stop children from going to school, they stop parents from going to work, and they take away any chance families have of lifting themselves out of poverty. Without treatment, they can lead to lifelong disabilities and suffering. But for once, this is something we know we can end, because we've got the solution. A simple packet of pills. What's more, many drug companies are providing them for free. All we need now are your donations, so we can deliver these pills to the people who need them most and set up treatment programs that the communities can run themselves. We've done the math, and with just 50 cents, you can treat and protect one child for 1 year against all 7 diseases. And you are just the start. We need you to get your friends, your family, and your co-workers to get involved. Because with enough of these tiny donations, we can do something huge. We can see the end of all 7 diseases by 2020. So join us, and together, we can see the end.
So again, I think that video conveys the scope of the problem of NTDs, but also really moves you to want to learn more about the hope that we're trying to convey, the solution. And I think it's also a great example of, we call it our mission in a minute. It's actually like 1 minute and 45 seconds long. But in a short period of time, we conveyed, the key basic facts that we hope will either move you to take action and get involved right now, or engage you to the point where you want to learn more. So not feeling that you have to overburden people up front with too many facts, too many statistics. Pick the key pieces of information that you have to convey and trust that your audience knows where to find out more. So the hope and the scope is the first part. The second thing that we're really focused on, and part of the reason I sometimes call N7 a storytelling campaign, is that we're not focused on bar charts and economic modeling, although that's very important. We're focused on conveying stories and really focused on empowering communities to tell their own stories of how NTDs have affected them and their families. So I don't have time right now to show you some of our dozens of very beautiful stories from communities all around the world. This is one from India. This is a young girl named Jyoti that we interviewed, and she gave a really great first-person account of living with intestinal worms. And this is a miner named Sargando from Sierra Leone who described his experience with schistosomiasis. So just 2 examples, but very important to us that we're not going into a community and creating a video that is narrated by an American doctor, but really allowing communities in a first-person way to tell their own stories. And then the third big part of everything we do in communication is to inspire action and commitment. So we're very focused on the fact that, it's a busy world out there. Like Dr. Martin said, everyone has thousands of people they're following on Twitter, on Facebook, all across these channels. And it's really easy for information to get lost. So everything that we post, everything that we put out communications-wise is really oriented towards moving people to do something. We don't want to just convey information for the sake of conveying information or educating, but really inspiring action. So a fun example of that, I don't think I zoomed this in. Oh, I did. Great. In the spring, we were trying to get particularly students, and Anjali described this really well earlier, we were trying to get students involved in some of our NTD budget activities. So we put together this infographic about the comparison of what Americans spend on all these various consumer goods versus the overall cost of the USAID NTD program. Because we know that hearing $100 million, well, to a lot of people, that sounds like we're already spending a lot of money, and they're not really understanding the gravity of what a cut to that means. But when you compare it with well, we spend 370 times that amount on pizza, it starts to make a little bit more sense. But we don't want to just put this information out for fun. We want to move people to share it and to invite their friends to learn more about this issue. And we've had great success. So actually, Anjali used this photo before, but these were some of the students that joined us in Washington, D.C. for our Student Advocacy Day. And these students and their peers sent more than 3,000 messages to members of Congress on Twitter, on Facebook, with phone calls, postcards, messages online through our advocacy action, and reached nearly every member of Congress in that kind of blast of communication. So we put the information out there, specifically oriented to moving people to take action and to get in touch with their member of Congress about the importance of this funding. So 3 tactics I want to talk about really briefly when you think about how to communicate on difficult issues like this, whether it's NTDs or another global health or development issue you care about. The first one I'll talk about is thinking metaphorically. And all that I mean by that is how can you take the key facts that you want to convey and put them in a different lens, something that anyone can understand, even if they're not a policy expert or a scientist or an epidemiologist. So this is a little bit dark, but this says Python report card, and he got an F in reading, writing, arithmetic, history, but he got an A in squeezing people to death. And the connection with this silly cartoon is that over the past couple of months, we have been trying to educate N7 supporters about the Sustainable Development Goals. And we were very excited to learn on Friday the UN ratified 17 goals and 169 associated targets that are meant to kind of guide the next 15 years of global development and our overall strategy towards ending extreme poverty by 2030. We were very excited that, unlike the Millennium Development Goals, NTDs were specifically mentioned under Goal 3, which is the health goal, Target 3.3, which was focused on a variety of communicable diseases. So NTDs are mentioned by name in that target. But, and here's the tricky part to communicate, there's still one last step in this process. And that's next spring, probably around March, the UN Statistical Commission will release a set of indicators that are basically statistical markers that will show our progress towards achieving these goals and targets. They're standards that every country in the world will be held to, and really specific ways to measure progress and measure effort. So what we know is that with so many issues included in these goals and targets, unless there's a specific indicator for the issue you care about, it's very likely not going to be prioritized in this new era of international development. So we have to make sure that we're measuring our progress towards these very lofty goals. So one of the ways we tried to reframe that kind of complicated relationship between goals, targets, indicators, is to talk about the indicators like being your report card, where we all know in college you might get, 25 readings in a semester, but only 3 of them are going to be relevant to your grade. Or, 25 assignments and only 3 of them are graded. Which ones are you going to focus on? Probably the ones that you know you're going to be graded on. So you can think of these indicators like the syllabus that determines your grades. So it's not enough to just have it in the syllabus, to have it in a goal or a target. We have to make sure we're also measuring it to hold countries and international institutions accountable. So that was a metaphor we tried to use to simplify this rather complicated issue. Another tactic that we use a lot is to take the pulse of pop culture and current events. So framing the content that you're trying to share around issues or topics of conversation that people already have on their radar. So one example of that, in the spring when we were doing all of our budget advocacy, the House of Cards, the new season of House of Cards had just premiered. So everyone was talking about House of Cards. And if you live outside of DC, sometimes people think that that's what life in DC is actually like. So when we're talking about things like the federal budget and negotiating with Congress, it was really fun to tap into this narrative about House of Cards. So we had a group of students, including a couple that were here with us today, create this really fun BuzzFeed post where Frank Underwood, the star of House of Cards, explains neglected tropical diseases and federal funding for NTDs. So I encourage you to check out the whole thing online. It's very fun, but also really conveys the key information you need to know about the NTD budget. Another example of that was in February when Eddie Redmayne won his Oscar. We posted this image on social media. It was pretty simple. It took me about 15 seconds to design and post. And fun story, a few weeks later, we noticed this weird spike in donations. And I'm part of the development team, so I'm one of the first people to see that happen as these donations come in. And it just grew and grew and grew, this incredible outpouring of donations, and we weren't really sure where it was coming from. It took us a while to figure it out and trace this back, but it turns out that this post, where we had tagged Eddie Redmayne's fan page, had somehow found its way to a news outlet, I think based out of Sri Lanka. And they found our celebrity shocker video, which I'll show you in a second, that features Eddie Redmayne. So they were like, whoa, what an amazing video, Eddie Redmayne, he's a big star. So they reposted our video, and it went incredibly viral. It went more viral than it went 2 years ago when it had been released, and actually got more than 7 million views on Facebook in the span of about 2 months. But all traced back to this simple little Facebook post about Eddie Redmayne winning an Oscar. So really important to be tapped into what's going on, kind of the zeitgeist of things. And on a more serious note, our most liked post ever was something we posted just after Nelson Mandela passed away. And I want to be careful to mention here that you don't want to be taking advantage of the news or trying to spin it in a way that's not really honest. But I think this very simple message, it always seems impossible until it's done, a very short but powerful quote attributed to Mandela, is something that's both a tribute to his legacy, but also ties directly back to our mission as a campaign. So you have to remember that whatever you're trying to create, you're not just broadcasting it, you're trying to engage with your audience. And things like this is what people want to repost on their own Facebook or their own Twitter. Messages that they want to be associated with, not just facts or statistics that only educate. And then the last tactic you can think about when you're framing communication is to use humor or shock value. And I'm just going to show that video I mentioned. It's called How to Shock a Celebrity, which has been probably our most effective communications method to date at inspiring people to learn more about NTDs and to get involved.
I'm sure you want to see the end of this as much as I do.
The great news is that we can.
All it takes is a simple packet of pills.
All it costs is 50 cents.
To treat and protect a child for a whole year
against all 7 of these diseases.
What's even more amazing is that if we all join in, we can see the end of all of them by 2020.
Join in and be part of something huge by liking N7 on Facebook, making a small donation and spreading the word by telling all your friends.
Together, we can see the end.
So, of course that tactic is not going to work for every issue at every time, but it is worth thinking about the methods that we use to tell stories in our everyday life: suspense, humor, engaging with our audience. These same things apply to any communication, and particularly to communication about issues that aren't very well known already. So thinking again about using metaphors, using pop culture and current events, and potentially humor or shock value, those can be really effective ways to kind of bring your communication about an issue to the next level. So I'll just end with some of the success we've had with this approach. So our campaign has grown a lot in a few years. We now have 90,000 Facebook followers, 35,000 people on our email list. More than 8 million people have viewed all of our videos across our different channels. Definitely recommend checking out our YouTube channel because we have some of our kind of longer form videos that are much more of the personal storytelling on there. And most exciting for me and relevant today, we have more than 50 university partners where students have either started N7 chapters or have taken steps towards getting an existing student organization involved in our fundraising, advocacy, or education. So that kind of leads me into the very last part of our schedule today, an interactive activity that we hope you guys are excited to participate in. And it has to do with something that we're trying for the very first time this January. You probably know that many causes and diseases and issues have kind of an awareness day, World AIDS Day, Breast Cancer Month, all of those things. And so far, that has not happened for NTDs. So we're trying to make it happen, but we're going to need a lot of help and a lot of collaboration to make this week a success. So we're celebrating it from January 24th to the 30th because January 30th is the anniversary of the signing of the London Declaration on NTDs, which was the commitment from a variety of pharmaceutical partners as well as international organizations to work together towards the control and elimination of the 10 most common NTDs. So that was on January 30th, 2012. We will be celebrating this leading up to the 4th anniversary of that big declaration. So what we'd like to challenge you guys to do is to break into a small group, perhaps a group of 4 or 5 people. We'd encourage you, if you're here with a friend, to move away and to break yourselves into different groups, and to come up with a creative concept that potentially N7 as a campaign could create or work with you to implement during this NTD Awareness Week. So we have another slide that has a little bit more detail about what that might look like, and we'll put that up as you guys break into groups. But really, the sky's the limit here. Whether it's an idea for a new video, whether it's an interactive fundraising challenge along the lines of the Ice Bucket Challenge, whether it's a crazy stunt that students could do on a college campus to get their peers involved in raising awareness of NTDs. We don't want to limit your creativity, so we're leaving the parameters pretty broad, but we're actually going to have the creator of the N7 campaign, the communications director at the Sabin Vaccine Institute. He's going to call in to hear pitches from you guys about what you come up with and give feedback on them. And I think we're also going to do some voting at the end.